There's a claim in General Walker and the Murder of President Kennedy in which author Jeffrey Caulfield bluntly states David Ferrie was perhaps the first Nazi in Lee Harvey Oswald's life. Caulfield posited this in light of Jim Garrison's suspicions about Ferrie's fascism. The lines are gossamer lines, but when you find them, they lead from David Ferrie to Nazism, fascism. Garrison also, quote, considered privately that Oswald might have been a civilian Nazi, end quote, Caulfield writes. So is it all possible to drill down into Ferry's purported fascist tendencies? We'll start with the strange case of one Glenn H. Pinchback. The confession in question is a letter allegedly written by David Ferrie, which evidently was intended for a friend at Fort Sill, a fellow called Barragona. Pinchback worked in the personnel office of Fort Sill's Operation Command. He was told about this letter from a Fort Sill associate, Robert C. Gehrig. Pinchback attempted to share the information with Jim Garrison's office in New Orleans and subsequently interested confidential. The letter purports racist ideology. It speaks of the JFK assassination. I heard of a few who were plenty mad when we killed Kennedy. A few sentences later, quote, I'm sending you the enclosed bullet as a souvenir. This isn't the only one, but it's the only one I have. It should be worth millions of marks someday, end quote, as in Deutschmarks. Who was Glenn H. Pinchback, who contacted Garrison's office 4 straight days in January 1968? At a young age, he nurtured a talent for music. Like Ferrie, he was an organist and taught music lessons to children and adults. He never married. He died in 1975 at age 48. By accounts in local newspapers, Pinchback was an upstanding citizen. Why would he fabricate such a story about David Ferrie? I have done this entirely on my own initiative, Pinchback writes in the confidential article. I have hesitated to resort to this means of alerting the people, but since my president was murdered, I have found that legitimate channels have become progressively and frighteningly elusive. Pinchback indicated the receipt of the profanity-laced letter was one Barragona. Pinchback didn't know how to find Barragona and previously had a falling out with Gehrig over political disagreements. Pinchback revealed to the DA's office that Gehrig was not the given name of the man but was of German origin. In those arguments, Pinchback remembers this Gehrig, quote, expounded some Nazi ideas, end quote. Moreover, Pinchback thought Gehrig was originally from Ferrie's hometown, Cleveland. A letter from Ferrie to Alvin Babouf in 1967 indeed mentions a Barragona, in which Ferrie recalls a memory, quote, flying Barragona in the beach, a reference to Ferrie's model of airplane, the Beechcraft. Furthermore, the writer mentions having horrible headaches. Ferrie eventually died in February 1967 of a ruptured brain aneurysm. Garrison's files indicate Barragona's full name was Joseph John Barragona. A Catholic, he owned the Barragona Oil Company. Caulfield flatly states Barragona was a Nazi. In the memo of the Pinchback call to the DA's office, one Richard Smoot was also familiar with the story. Pinchback even provides Smoot's phone numbers and Salt Lake City address. Indeed, an individual named Richard P. Smoot is linked to the address. Smoot was owner of SW Energy Corporation, a Utah and oil and gas production company. Was all of this simply a fabrication from mere Glenn Pinchback of Oklahoma? Someone who maybe was seeking to cash in on the craze that was the Garrison case against Clay Shaw and the death of Ferrie? Or if it was indeed Ferrie, were these associations with fascists just happenstance? Or is there a darker truth under it all? There is another intriguing claim, this time from the largely suspect Torbit document. I call it suspect because of the problematic citations of some remarkable claims, as well as the fairly outrageous claim that Ferenc Nagy, Permendic's board member and former prime minister of Hungary, was the umbrella man in Dealey Plaza. Quote, the Solidarist World Network is connected through the Old Orthodox Catholic Church of North America and Synod of Bishops of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, which a church-connected organization used one of its priests, David Ferrie, in New Orleans as an agent in the planning of the Kennedy assassination, end quote. I realize I may lose people discussing the Russian Orthodox Church and quasi-religious groups. In a way, though, I think that's the intention. It's so mundane and obscure, it is exactly the kind of clandestine territory a mad genius like Ferrie might thrive. And unlike the portrayals of Ferrie as a weird looking goofball, he was smart. I can personally vouch for the academic rigor he received in high school. That nightly workload was intimidating to say the least, and I remember he graduated a year early. Nobody graduates from such a high school without a certain kind of academic excellence. Torbett goes on, quote, Ferry became a priest and agent for the Solidarists when he dropped out of the Roman Catholic Seminary in Ohio and joined the Belarusian Liberation Front at 3308 West 43rd Street, Cleveland, Ohio in 1946. Belarusia, Belarus, White Russia, Minsk, its capital, where Ferry acolyte Lee Oswald lived during his Soviet defection era. The Belarusian Liberation Front was founded by Nazi collaborator Radoslaw Ostrowski. His story of ruling the Nazi puppet state out of Belarusia is told in The Belarus Secret by John Loftus, republished as America's Nazi Secret in 2010. Until the Red Army reoccupied Belarusia in 1944, Ostrowski oversaw the Belarusia Holocaust, in which 750,000 residents were massacred. Loftus believed Ostrowski and 300 of his Nazi collaborators were, quote, smuggled into the United States by the State Department to work as spies and propagandists against the Soviet Union, end quote. This is from Thomas O'Toole, reported in The Washington Post. Loftus found Ostrowski's grave at a cemetery associated with St. Euphrosynia Belarusian Orthodox Church in South River, New Jersey. The church was only consecrated in 1953. Loftus said to the Post, this monument is literally a monument to dead members of the SS. It is even topped by a circle of iron around the Russian cross, which was the symbol adopted by the 30th Waffen SS. The address in Cleveland, Torbett lists for the Belarusian Liberation Front, connects to a Slav, Andrew Chernavsky Jr. The Cleveland metropolitan area became home to a large number of Belarusian immigrants during the Belarus diaspora following the war. It should be noted here that almost all of the Belarusians arriving in Cleveland were Eastern Orthodox Christians, a note we will return to later. It is also critical to point out the Belarusian Liberation Front was an organization under the umbrella of the anti-Soviet Bloc of Nations, ABN, whose president was Jaroslav Stetsko, a member of the pro-Aryan secret society, the Sovereign Order of St. John of Jerusalem. Secretary General of the Friends of the ABM, Spas T. Reagan, greeted the Oswalds in New Jersey in 1962. It might just be mere propinquity, but Reagan made his home in Stroudsburg, PA, 60 miles east of Shikshini, home of the Order of St. John. It's fascinating that the American responsible for importing Nazi war criminals into the U.S. was none other than Frank Wisner, head of CIA's Office of Policy Coordination. In Asia, Wisner had the umbrella of SCAP, General MacArthur and his staff, primarily as head of intelligence, Major General Charles A. Willoughby. It's a safe bet that whatever Wisner had up his sleeve, Willoughby knew about it. It would certainly not be lost on Torbett, though I have been unable to verify soundly the connection, that Wisner was the CIA asset for Ferenc Nagy, another Eastern European anti-communist in exile. Prior to the Allied victory in World War II, Cleveland also harbored pro-Nazi sentiments. Recall, Ferry was not overseas in World War II. His brother Parmalee was a decorated war hero. William Dudley Pelley's Gestapo-inspired Silver Shirt Legion, which yearned for a Christian commonwealth, was represented with a Cleveland branch, which met, quote, in secret to discuss what they believed were Jewish and communist plots to destroy America. This is from The Cleveland Nazis, 1933 to 1945, born in the chaos of the Depression. The Silver Shirts also practiced a dark religion, infused with occult references, mysticism, and supposed supernatural power. When Fritz Gisbill of the Friends of the Hitler Movement spoke to a crowd of 400 in Cleveland in 1934, 2,000 protesters clamored outside. Cleveland police guarded the Gisbill gathering and prevented demonstrators from entering the hall. It is interesting to wonder if Ferry's father, Cleveland Police Captain James H. Ferrie, was part of the force on hand.